Hello, this is Heather Gilvary-Hamad, and I'm here today to present my ethnographic study for MSW 501, Human Behavior in the Social Environment 2, Oppression and Inequality. For this study, I actually decided to choose to do the project on myself. First, because I'm pretty easy, I have all my access to my information, but I also am appreciating how much in social work we need to understand ourselves better so that we can better service our clients. And so I found it some interesting aspects to this project, and I'd like to share it with you. So to understand my story a little bit better, it's really important to appreciate that for the purposes of this project, there are three important dates to keep in mind. The first is, as the TV show goes, I was born in the early 1970s something. Um, and and I was born to an Irish Catholic family. Later on, I married a Muslim man from Palestine, and that was on September 30th, 2001. That is correct, it was September 2001. And then 11 years later, on that anniversary, I converted to Islam. So each of these points kind of indicates some important milestones in my life that played a role in helping to shape me. So I was born to my parents, mother and father. We were an intact household, so to speak. I was child number 6 of 7. And in the picture on the far left, you can see the whole family shortly after my little sister was born. There's my oldest sister holding the youngest sister. Rosemary is the oldest, and Kate is the youngest. And in between Rosemary and myself, I have my 4 older brothers, and standing in the back in the white shirt is my brother John. Next to him in the red blazer is my brother Paul. On the bottom left is my brother Brian, and on the bottom right, just in front of me, is my brother Mike. And I would say that we were a pretty loud family, um, and that which there were 7 of us. But my sister Rose was 16 when I was born, and when that picture was taken, she was already starting her college career with her little sister in hand there. So you can see there's a significant age gap between my sisters and myself, except certainly my youngest brother and I are 7 years apart. In our family, some big occasions, my mother always made a big deal out of every holiday or any excuse for a holiday or party. It didn't matter if it was Christmas, Easter, your birthday, Groundhog's Day, Valentine's Day. There was always something for my mother to celebrate. And from what in this picture in the center here, this is apparently my 6th birthday. And my brother Brian on the left, or my right, I guess, in the picture, with the bishop's hat on, he decided it'd be fun to make paper hats for everyone, and everybody got a different paper hat. So these are obviously very simple things, but it was always you were made to feel special. Growing up in our house, my mother prepared only 1 meal a day. She was not a short order cook, as many parents like myself are today, preparing 1 meal for one child, another meal for another. There was 1 meal and you ate it, or you didn't, but that was what was for dinner. But on your birthday, you got to pick what was the meal and what kind of cake. My mother loved to bake cakes, so it was always she always made you feel special. Even though there was a lot of us, we always knew that that was our special moment. And in the far right-hand corner, we were asked in this section to talk about what are milestones in our families. This was my parents' anniversary, and I just had my first daughter. I'm there on the far left of the picture, my parents in the center of the picture, and all my siblings are surrounding them. So it was a big deal. Obviously, we all lived in different states and coming together for that dinner party to celebrate their union. And they always made sure that we knew that they were each other's most important person. And I think that always created a strong foundation for us as kids. You couldn't play one against the other. It didn't work. Um, and um, and they also, as we got older and got married, we all kind of appreciated uh, the sacrifices that they had when they were married very young. My father was not even 21, so legally he had to have his parents' permission to sign a contract of marriage. And they said they were high school sweethearts. They said they were too young to get married. They didn't know what they were doing. And so my father made a deal with my mother. He said that you can marry me for 100 years, and after the 100 years are up, you can decide if you want to still stay married, and if not, you'll be released with no questions asked. So it always became kind of the joke in our house. I think this was close to 45th, maybe. I'm not sure, but it was always a milestone. This was our Catherine was her name, and John, my father, would write Catherine 40 years down, 60 more to go. And that was kind of their joke on his anniversary gifts. We were expected to do chores around the house. My older brothers, in a lot of ways, raised me. My brother Paul eventually became a school teacher, and he was the main babysitter for me and my little sister. My brother Brian went on to culinary school, and he was always in charge of dinner. My brother Mike was just mainly there to pester me, and he felt that was his job. John and Rosemary were already pretty much gone by the time we were of any recollection. But we always had chores to do, and part of that was my mother went back to school as a nurse, became a nurse in her 40s, and so somebody had to do the work, so we all kind of pitched in, so it always left a big impression on me. So after I was married, I took on a whole new culture, and there were multiple stages in accepting and rejecting different aspects of my husband's culture, and then subsequently raising our children, consecutively raising our children in two different cultures. My husband is an immigrant, and so my children, as he is an immigrant, my children are called first generation Americans. He's not an immigrant. He's not a first generation. It's my children are first generation, and from their father's side, they're first generation. And there are a lot of dynamics that go along with that, a lot of different aspects and expectations that play into it. And for that, they are unique in a lot of ways. But the things to think about as far as culture after we got married, sometimes this was the hardest point, was how to raise the kids, because there is a large fear, stereotype in Arab Muslim culture that American culture is just a little bit too lax as far as raising the children are concerned. Things such as premarital sex, drugs, alcohol, dating, all these things are foreign, or at least pretended to be foreign in Arab Muslim society. And so it can be very scary for parents to come to America and raise their children here, because they're afraid they'll be exposed to things that they weren't exposed to. So a lot of our raising our children has been a lot of negotiating between my husband and myself, deciding what we think is best for our kids, and trying to do our best to raise them, realizing that it's different, that we're asking them to do things other than what their friends may be doing. And also explain to my husband that everything's not Hollywood, not every kid is doing these things. I didn't, so it's okay to be the kid who thinks that they're the only one who's not doing these things, and so we do a lot of things like extracurricular activities to keep them occupied, keeping focus on study and school. Another important aspect after I got married, as far as adapting to this new culture, and we talk about when an immigrant comes to this country, are they expected to assimilate? Well, in a lot of ways, I have been asked to assimilate into his culture as well. We've made a very conscious decision to raise our children here because Palestine is just a little too unstable, but there's some give and take in that. But a lot of times it comes down to what's culture, what's religion, and trying to dissect those and decide, no, this is a religious aspect that we want to hold on to, or this is a cultural tradition that maybe he had growing up. It's not part of the religion. He may have always thought it was, but I have to go to him and go to scholars around me and say, is this actually part of the religion? And kind of wrestle with that and wrestle with him, and then try to find the best route for our children. But I think that's like a key point to understand. So from a heritage perspective, I think, well, I was raised Irish Catholic and in a very devout Irish Catholic family. Um, and I have like quietly sat back and watched where the balance of power lies. And I would have to say that from what I've seen in my experience in my family, meaning my immediate family growing up, my aunts and uncles, it was really the women, and it was often the oldest born daughter, the mother or the oldest born daughter, were really in charge of the affairs of the family. Obviously, especially for my parents and aunts and uncles' generation, there was a sense that the males were the breadwinners until women started going more actively into the workforce and earning their own salary. But women really kind of ran the household from what I saw. So that was, it's hard for me to say that that's common, but I think that's been my experience, and also reviewing other Irish families as well. In the Irish household, English is the only required language, Irish American household. I remember reading the book years ago, I think it's Leon Uris, called Trinity, and it's a large anthology of the Irish history, and it talked about how the English came and outlawed the Irish from using their own language, Gaelic, or it was called the Irish. And I came home, I was living in Detroit, and I came home after reading portions of the book, and I was really unhappy with my parents. I said, why didn't you teach us Gaelic? And they both laughed because their parents didn't speak Gaelic. From my father's side, I'm fourth generation in this country, so it was long lost before they ever came. And I have cousins today trying to, and I think my younger sister's trying to learn Gaelic, but English is certainly the language franca, lingua franca. Um, as far as greetings, I think it's really funny because it's very different between the two cultures. So hugs and kisses are acceptable. Hugs, certainly male or female, no problem. My cousins and all will hug each other when we see each other at funerals and weddings and so forth. My sisters, not so much. Male to male greeting, very much less demonstrative. Maybe handshake, a slap on the back. Definitely not a kiss. Maybe a hug, quick hug, like if they haven't seen each other or there's, like some serious occasion like a funeral, but really not a whole lot of touchy-feely going on there. And I think the other thing to keep in mind too, what I've seen in Irish households is the sense of humor or sometimes sarcasm, which I've learned is not a really nice trait in the Irish tradition, but because sarcasm can be very mean. But humor and sarcasm is used at times of disagreement or to hurl insults at others. So if I want to be mad at if I am mad at my sibling, I might be sarcastic or snarky when it comes to how I interact with them. It never goes off very well, especially that we're all grown, but we still use it. So not very favorable, in my opinion, not very favorable. But I have my older sister defends it. She says, no, this is who we are, and it's okay. I've come to disagree, but that's kind of my perspective. The Arab American household and Arab Muslim households are hard to separate sometimes, but I'm going to go with the Arab Muslim because there is a distinction. There are Arab Christians and Arab Jews and so forth, but sticking with the Arab Muslim here for the sake of this study, very patriarchal. My husband, his family a little bit less, and certainly he's a little bit less patriarchal, but it's definitely there. Definitely understand that as far as appearances go, and as far as my husband's concerned, he's in charge of the household. And as many women do, you kind of learn to maneuver around that, but it's understood. And I'm okay with that. I really am okay with it. Arabic is important in this culture. I don't speak it at all. I'm terrible at it. My children laugh at my accent. I don't even properly pronounce my son's name because I can't say the letters properly, and it's a real disadvantage to me that I don't speak, or read, write, or understand Arabic. Greetings are, it depends upon who it is. Same-sex greetings, if I greet a woman, I will reach up, shake her hand, kiss on both sides of her cheeks, on each cheek. Men, same thing. They will kiss each other on the cheek, hug each other, maybe one-armed hug and shaking hands. But men will kiss each other on the cheek. It's not really going lip to cheek, but it's kind of kissing the air. Um, Sometimes some cultures do three kisses, so left, right, left, and sometimes there's kind of a jostling if you don't know what their particular tradition is. It's kind of funny. We kind of sit back and laugh as I mess it up from time to time. Um, but it's very important. It's very much written into the religion that who gets greeted when you walk into a room, how do you walk into a room, you should go from one person to the next, greeting everybody in the room. But when I greet a man, it's different. I would typically a Muslim man, especially since I'm hijabi, meaning I wear a headscarf, I would greet a man, and he would do the same by putting my hand on my chest, and he would put his hand on his chest, not my chest, on our own individual chest, and say salam alaikum and walaikum salam, meaning peace be with you and also with you. So, but it's very much, I would never reach out and hug another Muslim man. It would be very awkward for both of us. Deference to community and leaders is very important. So there's a concept in Islam called fitna, where it's kind of a sense of, as I understand it, it's a sense of chaos or disruption. And so if I disagree with a leader stands up and makes an announcement, this is what we're going to do, for example, and I'm on the council at the mosque. There's a certain etiquette that I would say privately to that person, do I think how about we do this? But I would never publicly deface them, because that would be very disrespectful, and especially as a woman, I've seen it, and I've done it once or twice, and it really was a bad situation. So I try not to. I try to be very conservative and cautious with anything that might be insulting. Just be very careful about hurting people's feelings. Very often it is seen that doctors, business owners are seen as pillars of the community, and so they're expected to take on extra leadership roles. So I've already delved a little bit into this, but just want to kind of re-emphasize this because I think it's important. Where does the authority come from? And how do you know where you fit in society? And so in the family and community sense, growing up Irish Catholic, there were certain authority figures. Those would be certainly my parents, older siblings, and aunts, uncles, though we only usually saw them once a year. They certainly ranked, and if they told me to do something, you better believe I would jump to it. And the other one is, it's kind of interesting, in this bottom, I guess it's the bottom right, you'll see some of my aunts and uncles, and it's kind of sad to me now. When I was putting together this project, these were the surviving aunts and uncles, and my parents are not in the picture. So I didn't realize, I think this was my Aunt Joanne's funeral. It's hard to imagine that my parents were no longer with us. But in any case, these are my father's sisters. He was one of 8 children, 3 boys and 5 girls. So these are the remaining sisters, and brothers, well, not even brothers. His brothers passed away before him. Brother-in-laws. But the second woman from the left is my aunt's sister, Catherine Ann. And so sister, she is an IHM sister, nun. And so certainly in the Irish household or communities, nuns and priests were referred to as people of authority and people of importance. So on the far left here, we see my older sister, Rosemary, and her whole life has told everybody that she is the boss. Of course, I disagree, but that doesn't matter because she's the boss. And she would even tell my parents that she was the boss of them. And she thought that was funny, and they would laugh. I didn't like that because I was number 6. But anyway, that's her role, and she really she fulfills that role by kind of guiding things and make sure traditions are upheld and so forth. That's in the middle are my parents on their honeymoon. My dad was in the Navy Reserves, and that's my mom, and they were just young kids. but those are my authority figures growing up, I would have to say, as an Irish Catholic young woman. Family members, older family members certainly, and then my aunt representing the laity, but clergy as well. So as I look at what happened to my sense of who's the authority, who's in charge, after I got married, it changed, and it changed because, a large part because of culture. Um, on the far left-hand side, we see, this was a picture from my wedding, and the gentleman standing on the left with the white shirt, that is my brother-in-law. He is an older brother to my husband. When we were getting married, he actually was our matchmaker in a way. But he and my husband all, we had a conversation, and we had been friends before I met my husband, this brother-in-law, and it's tradition in my husband's culture that I would call his older brother's uncle. And coming from my culture, I said, I can't do that. I cannot call you uncle. You are, by first name only. But that's still, even my husband doesn't call him by his first name. That's kind of countercultural. So I'm kind of not doing what I should be doing. But he is called by his brother, either Dr. Gahad or Abu Salam, meaning the father of Salam. And so he is definitely a person of rank in our family. He has a doctorate in sociology, and he's a professor. So again, all reasons that he is respected in the Palestinian culture. Sidid is my lovely mother-in-law, and I think I was talking about how much I just adore her. She's so sweet, but tough as nails. She's there at the wedding, and certainly as my mother-in-law, there's a high level of respect that goes to her, not just because of her rank, but because of all that she's been through and struggled, and just really admire her for her amazing courage and fortitude. And then even some more fun here in the same picture is a man named Abdul Rashid Omar. And Brother Rashid Omar is from South Africa. He is actually the person who officiated our wedding. He was fabulous because he had worked in South Africa with he knew Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He worked collaboratively on projects with them and interfaith projects. And so for our interfaith wedding, he was just the perfect person to run the show for us and help guide us. So as an imam or a minister in Islam is called an imam, he definitely would rank high, especially considering our families are both devout families, and we take religion very seriously. Now, even though I'm a married woman now, it's my parents again on their honeymoon. Aren't they so cute? Um, they, in the middle picture there, they definitely still and are no longer with us. I'll have peace on them. But they rank, and even though I'm a married woman, they played a very active role in our life because Muhammad's family was overseas, and so. Oh, this is making me sad. um, but happy to. In Islam, your parents are of the utmost importance. The only one person more important physically is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Other than that is your mother and your father, and your mother ranks higher than your father because she bore you and she nursed you and cared for you, and so you must listen to your mother. And then the far right corner, this is a fun photo. I think this was December 2020 or 2021. This is in Istanbul, and this is my husband's family. And in this photo, this is really something special. I'm teary, choked up about this picture. But on the far left is Manar, that is the wife of our matchmaker on the far left picture. My husband's sister, Fahima, and Fahima's daughter, Tassim. We all went to Istanbul for Tassim's wedding. Sitting next to Tassine is my husband and my daughter. And then there's Gad again, and my son and my husband's brother Omar. So three brothers and a sister. They met in Istanbul, and they had not been together in the same room since the 1980s. And so, as you can imagine, there was a lot of excitement in this family reunion. It wasn't the whole family, but it was just, it was really something to see people who hadn't been able to greet one another in person because of politics, being able to share some time together and introduce our families. It was the first time I met my sister-in-law because she came from Gaza, and Omar was living in Turkey, and Jihad and his family in Canada. So we're kind of spread all around the world. But that's family and authority. Sorry, I'm speaking too long on this, and I don't know how to edit. I apologize. So in religion and spirituality, this is probably one of the biggest in this section is probably one of the most important in getting to know me, um, both my previous life and my current life. But so I had some difficulties just finding some pictures to illustrate clothing traditions. What would be outward? What would you see in a Muslim or a Catholic family, Irish Catholic family? So on the left-hand side, you see some symbols of what my life used to hold physically. That is a picture on the top left is a picture of my family. My dad, I guess, is taking the photo. My four brothers in the back and the four ladies in the front. And I know it's Easter because there's an Easter lily there in the photo next to me. And I think what's striking about this picture that you might not notice, unless I tell you, which I will, is that all the women are wearing dresses. And that was my father's rule. The only day I was allowed to wear at school is obviously we were coming back from church, and Sunday was always a traditional Sunday dinner. We would dress up, we would sit down at the table and the tablecloth and gather as a family. Now, obviously, Rose and John weren't always there because they were in their own lives, but whenever the family got together on a Sunday, it was a Sunday dinner with a pot roast and that kind of thing. But the funny thing with this photo is that I notice it now, and I think back to, and I looked at the questions for this assignment, women allowed to wear dresses or pants. And I wear pants all the time now as a Muslim woman. But in my father's household, women did not wear pants. The only day we would, for school, the only day we wore pants to school, it was on gym day. And although I hated gym, I was excited to be able to wear pants because otherwise I was expected to wear a skirt to school every day. I hated tights or nylons, and so I always wore knee socks. So that was my compromise. I had to wear knee socks, but I always wore a dress. And so that's something that you may not notice in the picture, but it was definitely a part of my growing up. Next to that photo is my niece in her first communion, Bridget, who happens to be my goddaughter, and that first communion dress is the same dress that my little sister and I wore to our first communion, as did Bridget's sisters. She's one of four girls. In an Irish family, alcohol is definitely something. It's part of the culture. It's culturally acceptable for those over 21 or 18 when my brothers were in school, because 18 was the law then. If you're of legal age, it's certainly acceptable to have some drink. And then certainly being Irish Catholic, the cross of the Celtic cross, I think, Bridget cross. Things that changed after September 30th is how I dressed. And I didn't actually take the hijab on full time until about 5 years later. But there you see me and my husband on an Eid celebration. So compared to Easter, there you see us on Eid, dressed obviously in our best clothes. As far as food and drink go, we don't drink alcohol. Our house is completely dry. We drink a lot of fruit juices, teas, coffees, but no alcohol. We eat what's called halal meat. Halal meat is meat that's been ritually slaughtered, and it's probably in some ways similar to the kosher diet, although you can follow the kosher diet and drink, so there are differences. It's not 100% comparable, but there are similarities. And then again, this is another picture that I know exactly what's happening in this photo with the little boy eating. I don't know if he's eating a biscuit or fruit or whatever, but he's eating using his right hand. And that's conceived in Islam, as was Catholicism when my father grew up. The right hand is considered clean, the left hand is considered less than clean. So you eat with your right hand. So in a Muslim culture. This photo, again, for religion, there's a lot to pack in here, so under both of these traditions. So I tried to fit in eating and fasting and education. So as a Catholic, I was educated at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where the office takes place. Largely because my aunt was vice president of student affairs, my parents felt like they could safely send me there and she would keep an eye on me and I would respect her as a sister to listen to what I was told. I was not a great student and under high school. And then on the far right, you'll see me with a bow and arrow. And that's because in Islam, especially as an adult, especially as a convert, I've had to find my own way in educating myself on this new tradition. And there's a lot to learn. But one of the things that I cherished about Islam was that women, and you don't see this, but this is cultural, it's not religious. You don't see this in a lot of societies, but actually in Islam, everyone, male or female, is expected to be given the opportunity to an education. And one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that he instructed the society to teach their daughters how to have certain life skills, and that included riding a horse, swimming, shooting a bow and arrow, and there's another one I forget all the time, but these were life skills that certainly in Saudi Arabia 1400 years ago, in the 1400s, pardon me, 1400 years ago, it was needed to be able to do these things, to just be able to survive. So women historically in Islam have always had an expectation and a right to education. So I found a group of ladies. They are my mentors now. They are my teachers, my scholars. And whenever I have a question anymore, I go to Rabatat in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and ask them. And we had a retreat in New Mexico, and I learned how to shoot a bow and arrow. So you'll see me doing that. As far as pictures go of how do we eat, so you'll see my family sitting on the left. That's probably 1970 something again. Thanksgiving dinner, definitely. We're sitting at a table with a tablecloth and candlelight. My mother, again, was always about a celebration and themes and making every holiday a big holiday. On the right, you'll see my children in Istanbul. They're sitting on cushions on the floor. There's a tablecloth, or it might be newspapers. It wouldn't matter. Either one is fine. Tablecloth on the floor. We sit and we eat directly off the floor. Again, using our right hand. I know it's a mirror image, but this is my right hand. This is the hand I eat with. I might use a fork, or I might actually, I don't, but some people will just dip their bread or dip their hands right in the rice and eat with their clean right hand. At the dinner table in most Muslim families, Islamic households, you would see men and women sitting separately, not necessarily when my family and I get together, but if we have a dinner party, the men often are on one side of the room, the other women are on the other. I heard a lot of criticism with that when I was first married, but I think it's natural. I think that there's things that I want to talk about with my sisters, and the men want to talk about things that they want to talk about, and the conversations are different, and it's all okay. And if I want to, have a conversation with the men, I'm welcome to come join them. But I really want to talk with the gals. It's girl talk, it's girls' night out, just like any other time. And then as far as traditions go, I wanted to throw the fish in there too, so to just kind of talk about fasting. And obviously, as a Catholic, I was raised during Lent that we would fast, which in Catholicism meant, as I understood it, the Fridays in Lent were no meat Fridays, and Ash Wednesday and Good Friday were fasting days, where it was 2 meals a day and one meal could only equal 2 meals or something. I forget that equation. But in any case, that was our sense of fasting. My idea of fasting has changed considerably. We're actually in Ramadan right now. We're in the last 2 days of fasting. No food, no water, no marital relationships. For those who smoke, there's no cigarettes from about an hour before sunrise until sunset. And there's no food that's not traditionally forbidden anyway. That's not allowed, but there's certain foods we do eat when we fast out of celebration and culture and so forth. For these slides, I wanted to delve a little bit into life and death situations and how they're treated respectfully in each of these cultures I've lived in. So certainly in Catholicism, life is celebrated with a baptism. Typically in Catholicism, it's a baby's baptism, pretty close to when they're born. And death is seen as, in the Irish sense, if you've ever heard of an Irish wake, a lot of the stories are true. It's just basically a big party. People gathering together. You can see there that is, again, I think Aunt Joanne's funeral, with her daughter holding her cousin, I think, in her arms, and my certain cousins around, and just getting together for a meal and visiting and reconnecting. But really more of a celebration. You can see that although some of the men are dressed in black, I think this was a surprise to me. One time I went to a funeral of a different ethnicity here in America, and everybody was in black, and I didn't know people did that because in the Irish household we just wear nice clothes. We didn't necessarily wear all black. But that's just my aunt's funeral, very much beloved aunt. And you can see people are just, it's almost like she's not even, there's no sense of grieving the death, or the body is kind of invisible too, which I think is becoming more so. I remember my grandfather's funeral when I was in 6th grade, and there was a couple of days of a wake and people coming in, streaming in for days to give their condolences, and the open casket. And now it seems like more of my aunts and cousins and aunts and uncles are cremating, and the body is nowhere in sight. So that's where you'll see the urn. My parents were both cremated. And then there's a cemetery, but it's just varies by family, varies by situation, I suppose. In Islam, we don't have baptism. We have what is traditionally done is when the baby is born, the father, or I guess a male relative was always my husband in our case, but the father will whisper into the baby's ear the call to prayer, into the baby's ear, and just kind of letting them, that be the first thing that they really, or one of the very first things they hear, is the call to pray. That's kind of an initiation ceremony, so to speak. As far as death goes, it is very different in my experience. The death itself, it's not necessarily a dinner party or a lunch, and certainly not at a bar, but you would serve coffee, Turkish strong Arabic coffee, and dates to people who come to offer their condolences, and they sit and quietly read sections of the Quran. It's very, very quiet compared to an Irish funeral or wake. And then the burial is traditionally, preferably done before sunset. So it's pretty much as quickly as possible the person is buried. In Islam, we do not, I can't think of the word. We don't preserve the body. There's no formaldehyde, there's nothing. It's just simply very traditionally, and in some states don't allow for this, but traditionally the body is washed, ritually washed, and clothed in just a plain white cloth or shroud, and then buried directly, like without a box, without a coffin, without a vault, directly placed inside that shell, that shroud, cloth, cotton shroud, or what have you. They're placed directly into the ground, and the family members and friends who come to gather will actually scoop up the dirt and throw the dirt by their hands onto the grave. It's very ethereal. I know when my daughter passed, I was in the hospital. I wasn't able to go, but my son came back to the hospital, and he was about 2 years old, 3 years old maybe, and his hands were covered in dirt, and it was an amazing moment for me because it felt very, very real. Like this was very natural and very simple and very, it was being very beautiful to me that he didn't come back pristine. It was a death, and it was part of life, and so I really think that it's a very different, in my opinion, a very different uh, treatment of how we treat the body. Obviously, always with respect in both traditions, but just very different views on how to do that. Um, in in my experience of Catholicism, it was like allow the family members from all over to gather and get together and celebrate together. And maybe there is a body, maybe there isn't. In Islam, everybody participates, but it's just different. It's hard to describe. I've done my best to describe it here, but I think it's one of those things you have to experience. So in terms of preserving traditions, in the Irish sense, it's all about the gab, as they say. This is a picture of a woman kissing the Blarney Stone. Somewhere in my old photo albums, I have pictures of my parents doing the same. Um, the spoken word is highly valued in passing on traditions, telling stories. My father would say, telling stories whether they're true or not. So that's kind of how I grew up. Um, Post-marriage in Islam, the tradition is passed on and preserved through the Quran. The Quran, Muslims believe the Quran is exactly as was given to us 1400 years ago, and word for word, letter for word, letter. So nothing has changed um, as far as the written guidance that we received. As far as I think one of the questions was, do any of the traditions reenact events? And so certainly yes, we have two what we call Eids or festivals in Islam. Uh, the second festival, we're about to celebrate our first one, Eid al-Fitr, which is at the end of Ramadan. But the second festival is our high holy days, so to speak. That's what we would call them in Catholicism. Most sacred days. The Eid al-Adha is one where you'll see that's a picture of Mecca, and people are reenacting different events in the life of the prophet Abraham or Ibrahim um, in that tradition. So there's multiple things they're reenacting. That's a story for another day. But that is actually a lot of it is reenacting different things he did and remembering his experience and his obedience to Allah. So growing up, I would say that as far as education was concerned, it was expected that we would get an education. My father's one of his biggest points of pride was that he sent all seven of us to college. We all had our degree. And that was just something that was always drilled. I remember at one point I tested my parents saying, I don't think I want to go. And I think that was one of the biggest disappointments in their life. And there was a lot of a lot of discussion about that. And I was going to college whether I wanted to or not. So I think that that's was what was ingrained into me from a very early age. We're all going to college. We're all going to get our degree. Where nobody's taking a break here. No one's going to join the service and then join up later because it's just too difficult. You get your degree and then you can be free to do what you want in your life, but degree first. In my husband's tradition, there really are, and we tease him about this, but it really is a sense that there are three professions in this world: a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and that's kind of where many Arab families want their children to go into one of those fields. They're considered fields of prestige and respect. There's certainly others, but that's just the ones that we tease my husband about the most. So preparing this presentation, I did some research and found an article. It was really pretty funny because it's something I had forgotten about growing up Irish, that there's always a sense of impending doom or the shoe's about to fall, something good would happen, and nobody's really celebrating because they're all expecting something bad is just about to happen because we're celebrating the birth of a child or someone's graduation or a job promotion. Be very, very careful what you celebrate, because if you celebrate in too big of a way, it can be taken away from you. And one of the funny things I found also in another article was that one of the best compliments you could give a woman is that even if she succeeds, or I guess a man too, but even if this person is a success, they are level-headed, they don't let it get to their head, they don't let their head swell. So remembering that you come from humble roots, no matter what those roots are, I suppose, but don't ever get too big for your britches, or whatever the sayings might be, but be humble and realize that it can all vanish in a moment's notice. Certainly there's a sense of the luck of the Irish too. So that's why I have the Clancy brothers, which was a big thing in our household too growing up. I could sing any of the songs and they all have deep meaning for me, for the Clancy brothers. In the behavioral perspectives of Islam, things that we see in a way is, for example, I have a picture there of the Ramadan Mubarak calendar. And in Islam, we follow a lunar calendar, and Ramadan happens to be the 9th month of that lunar calendar. And there's a year there. The year that we're currently in, this is this year's calendar, is 1444 Hijra, which means that this is year 1444 since Muhammad and the Muslim community migrated from Mecca to Medina. And so our calendar starts from that moment in time. They were basically exiled from Mecca, where they were living, and they escaped persecution to move to Medina, and that's where the calendar starts, and it is a lunar calendar. So I think that's in the respect for these questions, that was one of the questions, like how do we view time and space. Another aspect of Islam that's really interesting to me, it's funny, I think it bumps up most against my American sense, not necessarily my Irish sense, but I think as an American growing up, I always had the sense that you create your own destiny, and that's not the case in Islam. We're in the last week of Ramadan, and we have a special night. It is a mystery, but one of the last odd nights, the last 10 days of Ramadan is considered, it's a mystery which night, but it's called Night of Laylatul Qadr, and that is the night where your destiny, so to speak, is written for the next year. And so you'll find people in prayer being most fervent, giving charity, fasting, doing kind deeds, acts, and so forth, in the hopes that it will be rewarded for the next year, because they did something special on this particular night. We don't know which night it is. It's just a night. It's said to be an odd night in the last 10 nights. But the other item in this picture here is the evil eye, or the Fatima's hand. And this is something that, again, as an American, I struggled with a lot as a new Muslim, is that can somebody else give me a look and it would put a curse on me or something? And I really struggled with that. I've come to think that maybe it's true. It's still a question mark for me, but I'm told it is true. I'm told that, you have to be very careful what you wish upon others, because you never want to wish something bad on somebody else. But it is a struggle for me. But that is, and so these are almost like talismans that protect you. For my final picture slide, I wanted to show some different aspects of culture, things that are acceptable arts-wise, more cultural, more fun components of both Irish and Arab Palestinian American culture. One of the questions is, what kind of pets might you have? And obviously I have the Irish, I think those are Irish setters, but dogs anyway. And in Ireland, families were often shepherds, so they would need a shepherding dog. I think those are Irish setters. I hope so. I'm not really wise on dogs. But then in our household, we have our little Hanuni. He's our little kitty cat. He's not so little anymore, but that's him when he was a little baby last year. As far as arts go further, in Irish, Certainly the storytelling is. That's why I put the guy there writing a story. It's probably more of an oral story, but a lot of very famous writers as well. Some musical instruments. And then in Islam, musical instruments would typically be like that type of drum. You see there's a couple different types of drums. That's one form. The other is looks more like a tambourine, and you just kind of tap on it. Or the bagpipes in both, which is really interesting. Both cultures are familiar with the bagpipes. In Arab culture, Arabic calligraphy is a very high form of art. And then for the fun of it, because dance is something that you only get to appreciate by watching it. So here on the far left-hand corner, you can see this is my niece's troupe. Doing what's called a hard shoe Irish dance. She's a very good dancer. She's been to national competitions. So on the far right-hand side here, obviously comes up. But that's a hard shoe, and that's my goddaughter who you saw previously, Bridget. Our right-hand side in red and tan dress. So you see her dancing the hard shoe here. That's Irish dance. Actually, Irish dance came about as part of a rebellion against the English. And on the other right-hand side, we see the dubka. Sorry, I didn't mean to start them simultaneously. This is very much a Middle Eastern dance and very much a national dance of Palestine. Here we see men dancing it. It's very traditionally danced at a wedding, but it could be any time. You get people together. Traditionally, men will dance this with other men, or women will dance it with other women. You can see them dancing together, but usually there's a handkerchief between them. They aren't usually holding hands, but that's called the debka. So I hope you enjoyed those little videos. So overall, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I do realize it's very long, so I don't know why the conclusion part didn't come out, but I have learned a few things about my own culture, and I think that by taking this experience of moving from one culture to another, I will have had an opportunity to gain in regards to cultural humility, and really being a little bit more open to other people and their cultures, because I've made the decision to switch mine, and it's not an easy decision to make. So hopefully that's been a benefit for me and my future clients. Thank you so much, and have a great day.